Via way of Zoom, Member of Parliament Matuga constituency. We're also joined from our Kisumu Bureau, Michael Agwanda, who's a political analyst, and right here physically, Stella Agara, who's a governance and youth specialist. Thanks for your patience. Let's continue with the conversation. Stella, I just want to hear what you have to say about the ongoing COVID vaccination drive, as well as the probe into KEMSA. A lot of developments happening with the PIC committee in the National Assembly. Talk to us.
So just let me start with the vaccines. I'm extremely uncomfortable about how we are receiving vaccines from everywhere, and we are taking anything that is left over from anyone. And maybe I should declare at this point that even as I'm commenting, I do not have sufficient information about the interaction between the vaccines. But I know there's a possibility that there are people who are receiving one vaccine and getting another in their second dose or something like that. And my worry right now is how we have engaged in a vaccination process, as Agwanda says, that is not well thought out, that it seems nobody is even bothered to figure out whether they're going to follow up on who's receiving vaccines and how well they're receiving them and what effect it's going to have on them. And it seems like nobody cares, actually. And for me, one of my biggest problems is the fact that we are not getting answers to the many questions that Kenyans are asking about these vaccines. One is questions of accessibility. Number two is a question of what happens to me after I take AstraZeneca. What happens to me after I take Pfizer? What is the option with Johnson & Johnson? What happens if I have two of them in my system? You know, because when you're administering such drugs, when you're administering such vaccinations, at least the consumer needs to make an informed decision about the one they want to collect. Mm-hmm. The only thing I've heard is denials about the effects and you know, statements by government officials having taken the vaccine and therefore saying it is safe. Yet we know too well that these vaccines are reacting to people's bodies differently from one person to the next. So for me, I think there's a level of carelessness that we really should not be tolerating with this vaccination process.
Okay.
And then, of course, we have the challenge of accessibility and the fact that we as Africans have decided we're not going to create our own vaccines. And our neighbor the other day, His Excellency Yoweri Museveni, decided to insult all of African leaders and say that in fact, he called them idiots. Mm-hmm. They were sleeping when other people are making vaccines. Yeah, yeah. He has something that has not been approved by WHO, but at least, as far as I'm concerned, I think there's you know, hope
progress,
in the sense that they are doing something about it. And for me, I would want to see a bit more of activity. As I was watching the news yesterday, as Katie was announcing about that, I felt that there's a possibility that we can even have our KEMRI and their departments there beginning to cooperate, especially because there's an East Africa community, beginning to cooperate and putting resources together to see if we can actually come up with a vaccine, even solve the problem just in East Africa, and then see if we can sell the remedies to the rest of the continent. Because we have proven as human beings that we don't care about each other, and when push comes to shove, survival is for the fittest and the fattest. Having said that,
let me ask this. It surely can't be all gloom. The president came out with a vaccination drive and the plans to vaccinate a couple number of people by 2021 and pushing further to 2022, and also reducing the logistical challenges by setting up a base right here. But what do you make of our drive so far?
Jesse, if I tell you I'm about to make ugali, and you're seated at my dining room and I tell you food will be ready in a short while, and then you come into my kitchen and I tell you my game plan is to make ugali and in the next 10 minutes the meal will be ready, and you find unga in the cooking pot, no water and no cooking stick, will you be confident that there's ugali coming? It is not in the launches that the president is doing. It is not in the number of statements he's going to make about what is going to happen. It is in how the process is being rolled out. Okay. And for me, that is where the assessment is. We are not here to you know, mark the quality of the president's commitment. It's great, but then we need to see how the things that he's actually directing his government to do are being executed. If it's being done carelessly, then we need to call them out for actually having engaged in that process in a very careless manner and you know, with lack of meticulousness in how they're going about things. But that brings me to the KEMSA story. Briefly. Number one, I'm extremely disappointed that some of the actions that are being taken concerning the KEMSA story has got to do with pressure from IMF and not from internally wanting to get answers. I am one of those Kenyans, and I know I represent very many Kenyans who are baying for blood from this KEMSA scandal. I desperately want to see heads rolling. I want to see people being punished, and I'm hoping that these investigations, these probes can be sped up so that we get answers from people. There are people who have died. There are doctors who have lost their lives because they could not access PPEs, and that we are being told that PPEs are rotting in the KEMSA stores, warehouses rather. There are children right now. Just yesterday, my mother received a child who came to visit her home in the rural area, who was coming to ask her for a mask because if she went to school today, on Friday, there's parade, and if she doesn't have a mask, she'll be punished. Children are being punished, and we have 7 billion worth of possibly masks sitting at KEMSA. I'm baying for blood. I'm desperately baying for blood.
Let's see the prosecution, if it definitely rolls. We know the wheels of justice grind. But at times they grind slow. Let's monitor that. Gentlemen and lady, let's shift focus to something that will definitely, that has hurt investors over the course of the week. It's the state of affairs with Saiton Investment. And they seem to be caught in a debt trap where Saiton is at the mercy of impatient investors, where their real estate projects, which they were relying on to rake in billions, have stalled. And just yesterday, the Capital Markets Authority was hard-pressed to defend itself on its mandate to regulate investments in the country. While they were speaking to Parliament, to the Finance Committee specifically, the CMA Chief Executive Officer, Wycliffe Shamia, indicated there is a gap in law that makes it difficult to protect investors from unregulated products. Take a look at this story.
Parliament summoned the Capital Markets Authority CEO, Wycliffe Shamia, following continuous complaints from retail investors on delayed payments from Saiton High Yield Solution.
This Saiton, which you have regulated, breached a provision of law by inviting investors to 2 products with similar names. Is that your true position?
Chair, I don't think it was the same product. I don't think so.
When you confirm to this committee that Saiton breached the law, the CMA Act, by availing to investors 2 products with similar names.
Members of Parliament trying to understand how unregulated and regulated products can coexist.
Isn't it true that every item transacted in the Capital Markets Authority has to come to your approval?
Yes, this one is regulated. This one is not regulated. I mean, you are the custodian of these products.
Chair, just to say we don't condone these unregulated products in capital markets. When we know of them, we take action that will cease those activities which are unapproved.
Even as you throw your hands in the air, you tell us you're helpless, you tell us things are in court, you tell us people did not obey your directives. Just know this is what we are trying to investigate here, whether we really have a CMA that is up to the task.
Members of the committee also sought answers to previous investments cleared by the Capital Market Authority, including Imperial Bank, Chase Bank and Nakumat.
From the time you gave the authority to solicit for funds and to the time that this bank was placed under receivership, what was the period?
CMA does not take responsibility for correctness of the information in the prospectus.
You have no powers to do anything. I mean, if you look at even the answers, Chase Bank, Imperial Bank, you wrote to Central Bank under Section 30G, and nothing was done since 2016, and you are just there.
CMA has taken enforcement action, including penalties, against at least 60 entities and individuals, but it needs an overhaul of the Capital Markets Act through repeal and replacement with a proposed securities investment. Brenda Kirubu, KTN News.
Well, that was a probe in the National Assembly with the Finance Committee putting CMA to task in terms of protecting investors in Saiton. Gentlemen and lady, I'll give you 1 minute each due to constraints of time. If we get your brief reaction to this, because it's definitely not all smiles. How would you react to this, Agwanda? Would you consider it's a lacuna in the law? That's why investors are falling prey to such devices which seem to fall apart after some time. What's your take on this?
I strongly believe it's a lacuna in law. That is one, and that is why investors are taking advantage of the common citizenry. But I also believe that the government is not very serious in ensuring that investors do not lose their resources, their hard-earned money. I say this because when you look at how our companies come up and the CMA tries to regulate them, but then you always find these people that are out there and trading without licenses and getting a lot of money, even those that have licenses, getting a lot of money, and then they just close shop and they disappear and leave people in great poverty. We don't see an intense investigation. We also know that sometimes when you have so much money that you've stolen in this country, you kind of just go scot-free. They say if you have money, you can buy a judge, you can buy an investigator, you can buy everybody, and you leave it, these people to the mercy of the Lord. And I tell you, it is so frustrating. Okay. A simple example is you've sent money to a wrong M-Pesa number, and once you send it, Safaricom will tell you that even if the individual, the wrong recipient, receive a single shilling out of that money, you have no way to get it back. You will have to go to court to get it back. When you go to court to get it back, you spend more money to even get that money back. I mean, the question is, why wouldn't Safaricom, once they've actually realized that this money was going to the wrong person, refund that money, no matter what time it is involved? Instead of saying, go to court, then you spend more money in court that you even don't have in the first place. So I think we are, as a country, we are just allowing theft amongst us, and we want to regularize it.
So how do we protect the investors? That's the big question, Stella Agara, in terms of there are regulators in the market, not just CMA, the CBK is also there in different areas. So how do we protect investors going forward? Because the business environment changes.
I think Parliament is in order in demanding that the regulator actually answers to why they did not protect investors from the madness that is going on at Saiton. There have been rumors for a very long time that Saiton is not a legitimate investment company, and that maybe it's not wise to invest with them, but no action was taken against them. And now we see their partners or investors actually claiming that they want to pull out. There's so much in this story that reeks of tax evasion, especially the mention of Mauritius, for me, just raises my antennas completely. So I feel like Kenyans are yet to get to the bottom of this problem. They are going to see more intrigues, and somebody must pay for this. Some people must pay for this. Whoever allowed Saiton to operate under the circumstances they're operating in needs to pay for this. And the government of Kenya also needs to find a way of even compensating Kenyans for the losses they have made. Because in this standard paper, Jesse, there's another story about teachers who lost money to some scam, engagement. I mean, it is the responsibility of the state to protect citizens from such investments by ensuring that as a regulator or as regulators, they stop such investments from existing in the country so that innocent Kenyans don't put their money in such investments. Okay,
Kasim Tandaza, you're parliamentarian, and of course what the Finance Committee was trying to find out is what they think should happen and who should take responsibility for such issues. Your final take on this?
Well, if there is an arm of the government which is actually working, and I know out there people tend to misunderstand the role of Parliament. Actually, it is Parliament. And most of the work of Parliament is done through its departmental committees and select committees. That is where most of the work is done. This is a role that has been affected when it comes to execution within the committees. But we also remember, we also have to know that the extent, the powers that those committees have. They can only investigate most of the time in public and recommend. Now, that is where the problem is. What happens after recommendation? It is now in public domain that whatever is recommended, nobody pursues it further, and it ends there. So, one time, I think it becomes like musical chairs, a waste of airtime, resources, and whatever, because recommending and no action being taken does not help. I believe the investors, the conmen who actually come into Kenya, and it's not only Cyton. We have so many Cytons out there.
Okay.
They are well aware that nothing will happen, more so if they have stolen a lot of money. That happens in this country, and therefore it's fertile ground for such imaginations on swindling people.
So the area of concern is definitely what happens after recommendations are made by the parliamentary committees. Prosecution of these cases is definitely what Kenyans are yearning for. Well put, Kasim Tandaza, Member of Parliament, Matuga constituency. We appreciate your input as always right here on the Morning Express, a frequent panelist, as well as Michael Agwanda, political analyst, joining us from Kisumu. Thanks for your input on the latest developments, as well as Stella Agara, governance and youth specialist. We appreciate your input and presence right here as we got to interrogate